Hey, this is Pete Nix. I'm the director of Steph Curry Underrated, and you're listening to Jim on Base.
Welcome back to another episode of the Jim on Base Show. For today's very special guest, we have on film director, producer, and writer who's been behind some documentaries I've really enjoyed. He also hails from the Bay Area and has directed a new documentary coming out July 21st. It's an Apple original film called Steph Curry Underrated. Please welcome the great Peter Nix. Pete, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on. And I know you've been a busy guy lately, right? You've been attending film festivals, doing interviews, so you've kind of been everywhere, right?
Yeah, that's kind of like that's the next part of the journey. You make the film, and then you have to sort of like take it out to the world. So we're having a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, one of the reasons I'm really excited to have you on is I'm from the Bay Area as well. And did you grow up in Oakland, or?
I didn't, but I've lived here since '97, so it's like longer than I've ever been anywhere in my life.
Yeah, and where were you at before then?
Like I was born, I was actually born in Akron, which is where Steph Curry was born, oddly enough. And but then my family moved to Boston when I was like little tot, and I grew up there, graduated high school there, and then went off to DC for college at Howard, and was there for about 11 years, and then came out here for grad school, went to the Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism, where I studied documentary film under John Else, and been out here ever since.
Nice. Well, when you were growing up, did you have brothers or sisters, or were you the only child?
Yeah, I got a sister, and two parents, sister. We had a dog at one point, but the doggy didn't last too long.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a sort of classic, I guess. Two kids. We didn't have a white picket fence, but we lived in the suburbs outside of Boston.
Nice. And what did your parents do for work?
My mom was a school teacher, which is part of the reason why I'm so interested in public institutions, and she worked in the Boston City public school system, and my dad worked for the federal government, so he was sort of he's a clinical psychologist working on delivery systems for mental health and substance
Mm,
abuse for the Northeast
gotcha.
region. So both of sort of what my parents um, did. My dad's passed away now, but my mom's retired. But a lot of that exposure to their work and you know really informed my own areas of interest as a documentarian.
Mm. Well, you mentioned studying film, right, at Berkeley. So was
Yep.
that something you always wanted to do as a kid, or how did that kind of start when you reflect?
Yeah, I always had an interest in it, and I used to like at our family. I come from a big family. My mom's one of 10 kids, and so I've got tons of cousins, aunts, uncles, and whatnot. But we would have big family reunions, and I would. My uncle Ray had this video camera, and I always commandeered the camera and would run around filming people and interviewing people. I had this thing called the Pete Nix Show, which is in the first documentary that I made, which was an autobiographical film, featured me in there, and that kind of it just was always there. That interest was always there, and I think I majored in marketing at Howard. I kind of thought I wanted to make commercials,
Mm,
you know, and then at some point that evolved into creative writing, so more on the fiction side. Um, but I had to pick a minor. I switched my major to sort of creative writing, literature, and then um, I had to pick a minor, and so I picked journalism, just kind of on a whim. And then I had to do a senior project, and I did this sort of little documentary on my own, and it really that's what sort of like triggered it for me was
mm,
just the process of figuring out how to do it, renting the lights, renting a SVHS video camera, renting like a nonlinear, one of the first nonlinear editing systems called Media 100. Um, just the process of the problem solving plus the creativity really made me realize like this is what I wanted to do.
mm. Well, were you always kind of into films growing up? Like, are you a film buff?
Not really.
Mm,
Like not like my like Brian Coogler's my partner at Proximity Media, like hardcore nerd, or like Quentin Tarantino worked at the video stories like that. I wouldn't say that was my experience,
mm,
but I loved books and movies. Like I loved the emotion that you got from a great story or the immersion into a world, whether fictional or documentary. I was probably exposed more to fiction, as a kid. I don't think nonfiction was as much of a thing um, back in the 80s. 'Cause when I came of age, even in the 70s, I was like 10 years old in 78. We used to watch a lot of there's a show called Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And it was just like documentaries about like beetles and like kangaroos and they were narrated and that was the first time like I think I was exposed to this notion of nonfiction as narrative storytelling. And what they did, and the reason why that show was so popular, was that they attributed sort of human characteristics to the natural world and animals and insects
Hmm.
and when you watched an episode, you were drawn into like the story, and I always like remembered that,
Hmm.
that obviously evolved into films like March of the Penguins or
Hmm.
Winged Migration or some of these great nature documentaries that became really popular, like about 10 years ago.
Well, you mentioned that and like your parents, what they did for a living, kind of influencing you. Was there anything like in the 70s and 80s, maybe events in the news that had an impact on you that made you want to go the documentary route?
A little bit more on the storytelling side. Like one of the first big things that sort of impacted me. Well, the first film I saw was there was Roots, which was a TV show that aired that had a huge impact
Mm.
on the culture, which was the story. It starred LeVar Burton, and it was the first time I'd seen a television show delve into slavery. And it really caught my attention. And then right around that time, I can't remember if it was before or right after, my this might have been a questionable parental judgment, but my dad took me to see the Deer Hunter when I was 10 years old. Which, if you've ever have you seen it, the Deer
No, I
Hunter?
haven't.
Oh man! So it's about the Vietnam War,
Mm.
and there was a famous scene in there, the Russian roulette scene, where they were going around
Oh.
the Viet Cong had captured these American soldiers and forced them to play Russian roulette,
Mm.
and that movie just like blew me away. And I think those began some of the sparks of what I saw as the potential of film
Hmm.
to take you into a place where you hadn't been before, or to reframe you know what it meant like to be an American, or to to show you different perspectives on life that weren't just American. Because I was pretty in a way sheltered. I grew up in the suburbs of Boston, and so I didn't see a lot of these sort of angles of life. And then later, when I got in college in DC, was when I first began to sort of get wind of sort of what was going on in the documentary world. And the first film that really blew me away was Hoop Dreams, which is
Mm.
the classic basketball story. So now I guess I've come full circle
Yeah.
with underrated.
Yeah, so are you a big basketball fan before all this? I was wondering if you're a sports fan.
Huge, and it's controversial because I grew up in Boston, so like and my mom's from East Boston, she's from Eastie, right? So she's got the accent and everything. My dad's from the South, so I guess it canceled out with me. Although when you get me worked up, maybe the accent will come out. But Boston's anybody who knows Boston, it's like a hardcore sports town, and it's like in the blood. So like I'm a Celtics, Red Sox, Bruins, Patriots, diehard. That's always been there for me. So when I sort of moved to the Bay Area and had my kids here, and sort of, you know, was watching the Warriors evolve from the perspective of my kids and my son, um, it was like instantaneous kind of recognition of something special was brewing here. Just like I grew up with like the great teams of the 80s, Larry Bird and
Mm.
Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale. I started to realize at some point, like, oh man, it's happening again, like from the perspective of my kids, and so that sort of solidified my appreciation and fandom for the Warriors.
So you must have been really torn then in the recent finals, Warriors Celtics.
It was crazy. I was making a film about Steph Curry.
Yeah.
I'm with my crew, my son, Sean Havey, my producer and DP, Allison Joy Gale, one of our producers. We're at the TD Garden for Game 6.
Wow.
Making this film, and yeah, it was surreal. And my you know my son, to his credit, he was wearing his Warriors gear. We were all wearing our Warriors gear. And the Boston fans are unforgiving, man,
Yeah.
even for a teenager. So he got a little he got some spice from the Boston fans. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
You might have learned a few new words.
Yeah,
Well, it must be surreal since you're rooted in Oakland now to have your film. It comes out everywhere July 21st, but you
yeah.
told me it also comes out July 14th, a little bit early in
Hmm.
Oakland, and it's going to be at the iconic Grand Lake Theater. So that's got to be
Yeah.
pretty neat.
Yeah, that's it's a special place. My daughter worked there, my son
Mm,
worked there. I've shown they premiered all my movies there. It's
wow.
right down the street from my house. It's kind of a vestige of sort of like, what we're losing,
Mm,
it's like we're losing, like, record stores. I mean, the record stores mostly gone, although the record stores are coming back a little bit.
yeah.
But
I know.
music stores where you go through and you bump into friends and
Yeah.
flip through CDs, and then, like, bookstores and movie theaters. I mean, I think these are all because of the changing nature of technology and sort of how we get our content, is a lot of those are going away. So we're trying to, protect those spaces as much as possible. So we're really happy that Underrated is going to premiere there.
Yeah. And how did this idea come about? Did they approach you, or was it an idea you had, or?
Yeah, they Steph approached us, and I met Ryan, north of 10 years ago, when I was working on the waiting room, because he
Mm.
was making this film called Fruitvale Station.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
And Fruitvale, it was about Oscar Grant, who was killed by BART police. And Oscar was born and then later died at Highland Hospital, where we were shooting the waiting room. And Ryan, I think he was trying to get access to film some scenes at the hospital.
Mm.
And someone introduced me to him, said, "Oh, Pete might be able to help," and so that's how we became friends.
Mm.
And you know, he went off to, in his world, his star took off with Creed and Black Panther and all that. And in the meantime, I was continuing to do my work with the Oakland trilogy, with the OPD and Homeroom. And when it came time, when Steph decided that this was the time that he was ready to tell a piece of his story, we were kind of natural. And then, coincidentally, we had started this company. I had joined his company, Proximity Media. I
Mm.
oversee the nonfiction division. So that's kind of it. All just kind of had an organic
Mm.
feel to it. Like, who else would, kind of do this,
Yeah.
And yeah, when I met him for the first time, we sort of clicked. We're both from Akron. We're both 6'2", mixed race. It's like kind of weird. It just felt, like it was meant to be.
Yeah. And I don't know, were you a golfer before it started, or did Steph kind of suck you in? Are you golfing now?
I'm like a mid golfer. Like
Okay.
I'll get out there. I consider myself a sort of decent athlete. I can hit the thing, but I'm not like, I mean, Steph is a legitimate golfer. I mean, he's like professional like
Yeah.
level, and Seth too. Seth's really good. Dell, the whole
Mm.
family.
Yeah, the trio.
Yep.
Well, I thought it
I
was
think
pretty.
Seidel probably golfs too.
Oh yeah, probably.
Sure.
They're
I'm
probably all
pretty
in
sure.
there. Well, I thought it was interesting. I got to watch the movie last night, and it
Mhm.
opens up in New York, and I just thought it was great because I happened to be there. A friend from work and I,
You were
Tim.
there that
Yeah,
night?
yeah. I always said I want to see the Warriors just play at Madison Square Garden, and we bought
Oh, that's
tickets
fun.
months ahead of time, and it all worked out.
That's great. Yeah, that was. I mean, how special is that
Yeah,
for him to break the record, and basically like the mecca of basketball.
yeah,
Was so special, and we were tracking it because we were like, "Where is he going to break it? Where is he going to break it?" And like, we need to kind of be there, and we need to film. And
yeah,
if it had happened anywhere else, I don't think that. I don't know. I just, there's something about how that all unfolded that was really really special, and the fact that it was kind of like almost like not a footnote. Like we sort of used it to set the stage for the movie, but the
mm,
movie was about so much more than
hmm,
just what he's doing today in the NBA and how he's had this impact on the NBA. But it was really great to be able to kind of like launch the film in that way.
yeah. And I had Chris Mullen on last summer, and I told him I've never experienced anything like that in an arena. Like when every time the Warriors got the ball, the whole place was on their feet. And
Right,
it reminded me of like Barry Bonds when he came to bat. Other than that,
right,
nothing in sports really reminded me of that
right.
moment.
Oh man, Mully, we gotta make sure Mully sees the film.
Yeah. So curious about, his work ethic, and it takes so much to get to that level, obviously. Did it surprise you, his work ethic and what he does? Because I thought it was pretty cool in your film just to see the dribbling, the tennis ball, he's hitting
Yeah,
like lights.
yeah.
Pretty amazing.
Like it's high tech training. So it's
Yeah.
incredible how far the training has come, and
Hmm.
we didn't harp on it too hard in the film because the film, like again, like the film became so much more than about what he's accomplished on the court.
Hmm.
Um, but and I wouldn't say I was surprised by it because I assume that he's a high level athlete. He has like a crazy training regimen. Um, it was impressive to see and be reminded of how far training techniques have come, and because of the way he changed the game, um, not just on the 3-point shot. What is less talked about is his dribbling
Mm.
skills, his handles. It takes a lot of work, sort of like dial that in and fine tune that. And
Hmm.
you see it now with younger kids, like they're they're not just learning how to shoot the long ball, which you see these kids launching threes in like elementary school now. It's crazy. But like the training and the sort of techniques, and you can go on YouTube or TikTok now, and you can see, these sort of workouts that with repetition will allow you to really develop kind of crazy skill sets. Um, and a lot of people do that, but they don't rise to the level that
Mm.
Steph does, right? And I
Hmm.
actually asked him this question, and his response was pretty sharp and pretty direct. And he says, "Nobody works harder than I do."
Well,
And
it shows.
we got that sense, and
Yeah.
he's driven. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He's been, he was overlooked, and he wasn't even recruited by Virginia Tech, which is
Mm.
where his parents were both stars. Like he
Yeah.
didn't come out of nowhere. He wasn't like some random kid. He was the son of Del Curry.
Yeah.
That was actually more surprising. Was the realization, the depth to which he was overlooked was
Mm.
surprising to me. I didn't actually realize that he wasn't recruited by one D1 school, so apart from, Davidson.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either. So it was, even if you're a hardcore Warrior fan, you're going to learn a lot, and the message is great. And one thing that I took away too is I got to meet him last summer at the Tahoe Celebrity Golf Tournament.
Hmm.
And one thing that I took away was just how genuine he is, how he kind of
Yeah.
looks you in the eye. He wants to know your name.
Yep.
So, what was that experience like for you befriending him? And I imagine it must have been even cooler maybe to see him interact with your son during
Yeah.
this process.
Yeah. I mean, Paolo, my son, was playing it cool for the most part. And I kept thinking about, man, like, if my dad was making a film about Larry Bird, and I'm like, hey, like, how cool would that be?
Yeah.
And but Steph is always present, and I think that was the first thing I noticed about him when I met him for the first time was that what you just described. He looks you right in the eye, and it's just like,
Yeah.
whoa, it's like there's a genuine sort of presence there. The first time I met Steph, it's kind of like what you were describing. He looks you right in the eye, and there's a presence there that's sort of genuine. And I don't, I think it's difficult for celebrities, athletes on that level to sort of have that be genuine because they're just like jaded. Like they've
Mm.
done a gazillion interviews and they've said the same thing over and over and over. They've met a million people. But you just got the sense with him that he is there and interested. Granted, he's meeting the person who's being, responsible for telling his life story on some level. But I was really surprised by his humility,
Mm.
his easygoing. Not, I wasn't surprised by his easygoing nature because I think I saw that from a fan's perspective, like in the press conferences. But it was consistent with sort of the way I saw him presenting himself and his connection to his family. Like we met Riley for the first time, I think, after that first championship when he brought her up during the press conference, and that's something that's important to him, and I think to a lot of athletes who you see, a connection to their family, or they will. introduce you to their kids. It's partly it's to communicate to people the importance that the family plays in their lives. But another way is, I think a lot of athletes do want to be relatable to the fans, and
Mm,
it's hard when you're like a superstar. Like, how do you relate? But
yeah.
part of Steph's allure is that he is kind of an average looking guy, like terms of his size, in terms of like his stature. He's not like Wemby or LeBron, or even like Kobe, Jordan, physical specimens, like rare, like unicorns. Like he is like anyone could do it, So
Yeah.
not everyone does do it, and there's a lot of reasons to that, and that's part of what we wanted to explore in the film is
Mm.
the role that mentorship played in his success, the role family played in his success, the role that validation from the community of Davidson College, played in his success. So
Yeah, and to comment on that too, one thing in the documentary that really stood out to me was how, it's his image, it's his name, it's always Steph Curry. But he did say how no one's ever really self made, and he remembers everyone that kind of helped him get to this level. So that really
yeah,
stuck out to me.
yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, I think, anybody who achieves, unusual success, you can find someone in their life that's not a
Mm.
parent that had an impact on them, whether it's a coach or a teacher, you can usually find that.
Yeah. And speaking of the documentary, it's called Underrated. And it kind of reminds me of some of your other films in a way. Oakland, it's next to San Francisco. I feel like there's kind of an underrated element to that. So, are you kind of someone who notices the underdog or roots for the underdog? In Homeroom, you have schools that are
Mhm.
dealing with budget cuts.
Yeah.
Highland, it kind of talks about an underserved population. So, just
Yeah.
thought it was interesting how there's a similar storyline at times
Yeah.
in some of your films.
And even cops, and this one's a way more controversial, but cops are kind of underrated in a way that, that they're struggling to sort of like tell, in the wake of how people view,
Yeah.
the police, which, I think firefighters have it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a consistent thread through my work and even me, like I'm a documentary filmmaker, like Ryan makes like, big Marvel movies with
Yeah.
movie stars and gets tons of big budgets and all that. And documentary filmmakers scrape to get every little last penny to make their movies. And so I relate to it personally on that level. But and it's just I think it's a storytelling genre. It's a storytelling sort of device that's very common. And it's a universal idea that we've all felt at one point or another misunderstood or overlooked or in various ways in our lives that we can connect to that. And because the person's story that we're telling is Steph Curry, not, Michael Jordan, I mean, you couldn't, it'd be harder sell to sort of,
Yeah.
do a portrait of another athlete who, is maybe more of a unicorn sort of in terms of their physical gifts or other things. So that was something that we wanted to understand what that meant for him,
Mm.
and that really pointed back to his origin story and beginning, you know, when he was in basically in high school, but he
Yeah.
looked like he was in middle school.
Well, with your past films, The Waiting Room, Homeroom, The Force, people have said it's kind of like an Oakland trilogy. So does
Mhm.
that mean, are you kind of done now with Oakland related documentaries, or what's your thought process on that?
It I probably get like two or three or four ideas a month, like where I'm like, I want to do that. I
Yeah.
wanted to make a film about like the Oakland Coliseum, in the stands, how everybody kind of comes together from all different backgrounds in this common purpose. I wanted to make a film about the Oakland port. I
Mm.
wanted to make a film about City Hall. Have you ever heard of Frederick Wiseman? He's a documentarian based in Boston, and he's
Oh,
done
no.
these like series of films, and it's crazy. The guy's like 97 years old and he's still going. He made a film called At Berkeley. He makes like observational films
Mm.
about mainly institutions, but he was been a big um, influence on my career. I haven't done as many films, but I kind of follow the same track. But I'm Oakland's a phenomenal stage for storytelling because it's a city that's so diverse. The diversity is both beautiful and challenging.
Mm.
And it's also local, but it's reflective of a lot of the things that we're grappling with as a nation, from like, access to healthcare, criminal justice system, homelessness, the political system, gentrification, all these issues manifest in really dynamic ways
Mm.
in Oakland, and not just stories that are difficult, stories that are inspirational. Homeroom was an incredibly inspirational story, seeing these kids in the wake of COVID
Yeah.
having lost so much, like their prom, their graduation, the camaraderie of senior year and all that, for them to sort of find their voice and sort of push this initiative to bring more resources to sort of mental health and to the school was stunning for me to witness and be privileged to be able to document. And so I could keep going. This is technically the fourth film. We actually kind of the fifth, because we just also have another film coming out called Anthem
Mm.
that partly takes place in the Bay Area. That's a music documentary. But all of my films so far have touched on, with the exception of my first film, which is my personal film, have used Oakland as a stage, and so I can't imagine not continuing. So it's just a matter of what's the next thing gonna be, and
Yeah.
you have to stay tuned on that.
Well, like you said, Oakland, there's a lot of material there.
Fire. We did Fire. I wasn't the director,
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. I saw some of that.
but I shot there. I don't know if you've seen this one. This one came out in early 2000s,
Oh, okay. I think I saw a later one. Like,
and it was about the women who going through the academy,
oh, okay. No, I haven't seen that one
the,
then.
the fire academy. Yeah.
You have to get the link for you from you on that one.
I don't know where it is. It's like something that aired on like PBS or something like
Oh,
many
okay.
years ago. I'll see if I can dig it up.
Yeah. Well, one last thing I was going to mention about Oakland stuff was maybe you can make one on the A's, save the team if it's not too late.
It's too late. It's
Yeah.
cooked, man. It's done. They're
I'm hoping
gone.
it falls apart. I don't know.
Could it still fall apart? I don't know. I was
Yeah.
just I was just at a doctor's appointment. My doctor is the team doctor,
Oh.
and his son was like, "Are you gonna have to move to Las Vegas?" It's so sad. Like, I wish, Oakland could have, figured it out. But, I think, the public doesn't have an understanding of sort of the machinations of policy, city politics, professional sports teams, and a lot of my work is about going into those places to illuminate for the public that doesn't have an access to these places, sort of how our institutions work, how our
Mm.
systems work, how the dynamics of community, the dynamics of politics, and that's really what kind of like drives a lot of my work is the desire to bring audiences into these spaces so that they can both be entertained and brought into a powerful story in an intimate way, but also come out with a deeper understanding of
Mm.
their community.
Well, you also mentioned Ryan Coogler, and I kind of recently realized about your guys' friendship because I
Mhm.
saw you do some posts, I think end of last year at the Wakanda Forever film premiere in
Yeah.
Hollywood. And that must have been pretty fun to be a part of that.
Oh yeah, it's been incredible watching Ryan's trajectory, and just a reminder that we have to recognize that we have voices that are
Mm.
powerful that exist in our communities. We made this film about Oakland High School. These kids are incredible, powerful kids. Their GPAs are terrible, a lot of them. Their SAT scores are not great, and sort of they're not getting into like all they're not getting that validation of like, oh, Harvard, like the Ivy Leagues and all that stuff. And it's like we've kind of lost our perspective
Mm.
on how to value potential in our society, and I think that that's changing. I think people like Ryan, someone saw Ryan just like someone saw potential in Steph.
Mm.
Someone saw potential in Ryan and said, um, you need to do, I want to help you, and he obviously did the rest, but no one could have made Creed, and Rocky, that franchise was done. They were Stallone had decided it was
Mm.
finished, and Ryan came to them and said, "Hey, I see an angle on this from the perspective of this black family, and here's the story." And that has created a new franchise,
Yeah,
or
there.
going and saying, "Hey, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What if we look at it from the
Mm.
perspective of Afrofuturism?" And I saw Black Panther in a theater in Utah, full of white Mormons, packed. It's just like mind blowing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's beautiful to see that. Granted, we are struggling at times, our cultural differences in this country, our political differences, and sometimes it's hard for us to see each other and understand each other. But that's where I feel like the optimism lies, and it's the power of storytelling
Mm.
to to sort of break through that. And sometimes it's slow, and it's like generational change. Sometimes it takes a while, but you know, being exposed to those perspectives is important in our culture, and that's what he represents. And to some degree, that's what I represent. I have a different perspective than Ryan. I'm also a black filmmaker, but I'm mixed race. I was adopted. I
Mm.
was raised by a black family. Went to Howard. But I see life. You could give me and Ryan the same subject matter and say make a film about this, and you get two different films.
Mm.
We could give the film to you. It would be a different film, and we need all of those perspectives. So we're just happy that we can contribute ours.
Yeah. And Coogler, he's a Bay Area guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Oakland?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Bay Area, born and raised, grew up, athlete, St. Mary's, he's tried and true, and like that, and he's not the only one. Like there's like Boots Riley has his
Yeah.
new show out. I'm a Virgo, which is just like bonkers, so good, and so unique. He's such a talent, and you've got like Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden. They were just shooting their new. They did they did a Marvel Captain America, and they Half Nelson, and their Bay Area. There's a bunch of really exciting the blind spotting. W.
Mm.
Diggs. A lot of talented storytellers here in the Bay that reflect this diversity,
Mm.
and we're making an impact in Hollywood.
Yeah. You mentioned you went to Howard and then Berkeley. So just curious, how did going to those different schools maybe help shape you, or what impacts did they make on you as a filmmaker?
Well, Howard, has a legendary cinema program, and I wasn't as an undergrad fully plugged into that, but I think through osmosis, I sort of picked up on it. But Howard is was a mind blowing experience for me as a young black kid trying to like understand his identity
Mm.
in this country, to learn that being black means many things. There's a spectrum and a kaleidoscopic stage there, and that sort of taught me a lot. That taught me a lot to sort of value my own unique sort of voice as not just a storyteller, but as a black storyteller, and what that means to
Mm.
me. Um, and it's something about the validation, sort of similar to sort of how Steph was validated by Davidson College. Howard is the type of place that sort of really validates you. And I think even like years later, like Steph just donated $1 million to Howard a few
Mm.
years ago to their golf program. There's all this talk about sort of HBCUs, a lot of athletes choosing HBCUs over going to like D1 schools, and it's sort of like a pride in the notion of that kind of environment. I know it's whatever, it's controversial to some people, like oh, we can never have like an historically black white college, but there's that speaks to the need to still talk about history and sort of the evolution of the HBCUs and why they came about. And we're still relatively. I'm 55. My great grandfather was born a sharecropper. His father was born a slave. I mean, that's
Wow.
like mind boggling
Yeah.
to think about. We're not that far away, and so I think when it comes to storytelling, we're seeing, and I think, Ryan didn't go to an HBCU, and he always, whenever I talk about Howard, or whenever people are on Zooms that went to HBUs, he gets a little bit like, damn it. But I think, you don't have to go to an HBCU, but it represents this idea that in cinema and storytelling, you get better results when you sort of break open like the perspectives. Like when you bring in new perspectives to storytelling, you're going to get better storytelling, and that's what sort of Howard, I think, primed me for in my career, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah. Well, Peter, I got to say, it's been great to have you on the show. It's kind of full circle for me because I found out about you when I was in paramedic school, and it was right when The Waiting Room was coming out. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I remember being able to see that, and then I've kind of just checked out the rest of your stuff and just kept tabs on you whenever you come out with a new project. So,
Oh, wow. That's
yeah,
great.
it's been great to have you on, and again, thanks for the time.
Thanks, Ryan.